Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our February 12th council session. We will start our session with an invocation from Reverend Barbara McKenzie, chaplain at Suburban Hospital. Please rise as you're able.
I offer this blessing. God of our being and of our becoming, God of our occupations and preoccupations, God of our life and liberty, we thank you for this day as we come together with the calls to stewardship, righteousness, and justice as members of this Montgomery County Council. Bless our communities and country with unity, diversity, and peace. Grant us the wisdom to create what is essential for the common good of all county residents. Keep within each of us our hearts for the love of all people and remind us to be good stewards of the God's gift of creation. We are joined by a common purpose today and a spirit to serve and live and work together. Give us courage, compassion, and commitment for the challenges ahead. God of all that is, God of all that was, and God of all that will be. Let it be well in our lives. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend McKenzie. So now we're on to general business. I would like to turn it over to our clerk, Ms. Lamarcy.
Thank you. Good afternoon. There is an addendum this afternoon. Added to the agenda is item number 9, introduction of a bill, expedited bill 319, at the request of the county executive and sponsored by the council president. The council did receive a petition this week. It was from residents of South Bradley Hills neighborhood supporting the funding for Bradley Boulevard, Maryland 191, the improvements project. It was signed by 103 persons.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lamarcy. So the minutes for January 28th and 29th have been distributed in advance to all council members. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, we will adopt those minutes. We are now going to move right into our public hearings. And for item number 2, this is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY19 capital budget and amendment to the FY19 to 24 capital improvements program for the Department of General Services in the amount of $1,990,000 for the council office building garage renovation. A Government Operations Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, February 14th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business today. And we don't have any speakers for this particular item, so that public hearing is closed. For item number 3, this is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the county's FY19 capital budget and amendment to the FY19-24 capital improvements program for the Department of Transportation in the amount of $1 million for resurfacing residential and rural roads. A T&E committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, February 14th. And we don't have any speakers for this item either, so this public hearing is closed. On to item number 4. This is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the county's government FY19 capital budget and amendment to the FY19-24 capital improvements program for the Department of Recreation in the amount of $17,016,000 for the South County Regional Recreation and Aquatic Center. A public Housing and Economic Development Committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Monday, February 25th. And for item number 4, we don't have any speakers. So the public hearing is closed. Item number 5 is a public hearing on a resolution to approve a declaration of no further need and the disposition of County Parking Lot 43, which is located at 8009 Woodmont Avenue in Bethesda. A joint Government Operations and Transportation and Environment Committee work session will be scheduled at a later date. And there are no speakers for this item, so this public hearing is closed. For item number 6, this is a public hearing on a resolution amending Resolution 18-1162, which sets transportation fees, charges, and fares. Action is scheduled immediately following this public hearing. There are no speakers for this public hearing, so the public hearing is closed, and we have a live Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you very much, Council President Navarro. This resolution is intended to delegate authority to the county executive in the event of a future shutdown to be able to waive fares on Montgomery County operated transit systems. We discovered during this previous shutdown that the county executive is not able to waive fares. The council has the authority to change fares, and so that action can't happen without the council taking action. And so what we're doing here is establishing that in the event of a partial or general shutdown, the county executive can do that. And we're also trying to go a little bit further and embrace contractors who have often not been able to access some of the government response initiatives because they typically, we've seen a lot of them limited to federal employees, and we certainly know that we have a lot of contractors who are also feeling this heat. So in front of you, there is a resolution amendment, which I would like to move this language that would extend it to contractors and specify that upon presentation of a valid federal photo ID, and that this would be sufficient for a ride-on to be able to manage that access point. Glenn, is there anything I'm missing there that you should clarify, please?
I just want to say, one thing you said at the beginning, Mr. Reamer, the county executive does not have the authority to change fares. Only the council does that.
That's what I said, right?
You think you said that he can change fares, but he can't make that. I'm
I
sorry.
may have misspoken. What I was trying to say was the county executive cannot change fares. The council can only change fares.
Okay, then that's right. And Dan Hibbert is here, head of Ride-On. He can talk about implementation if you're interested in that.
Dan, you run a great bus system. Anything you'd like to share with us?
We could certainly respond to the changes should the federal government shut down, and we need to carry these customers to our destinations.
Thank you, Dan. So I move this language in front of us here. Thank you.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reamer, second by Councilmember Joando. Any discussion on the particular amendment? Without objection, we will accept the amendment. So now on to Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Councilmember Reamer, for proposing this. Councilmember Hucker and I know several others, but we hosted an event for furloughed and impacted families and contractors just on Friday, and it's very clear that people are still feeling the impact. So I just think this is very important. I'm glad we're taking this step, and maybe we can talk to our WMATA folks as well. But thank you all for being here, and just wanted to say thank you for allowing this to go forward.
Could I add? I'm sorry. Could I just one point? I should have said this a bit earlier. What's different about this provision than everything else in the resolution is that rather than setting the fare itself, it's granting the executive the authority to be able to do this if he thinks it's the wise thing to do. The reason why that's the case is because he may choose, for example, if WMATA does not make it free for Metrobus, or if MTA does not make it free for MARC, or he may decide that the county executive may say, well, we're not going to go alone on this. Also, it makes a difference in terms of when this program would start and end, rather than having the council having to come back and say, okay, this is no longer in effect. So it gives them more flexibility. But in that respect, it's a little different than all the other settings of fares and fees in the resolution. I'm sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. And I think Dr. Orland just addressed my question, which was the time span for which this would be on the books. And it sounds like it would indefinitely give the county executive the authority in the unfortunate event that another shutdown occurs or occurs some point later in the future.
This would be in effect until the end of the fiscal year. Every year in May, you adopt a new resolution for the following fiscal year. So this provision could be re-upped, of course, but literally this provision is just until June 30th.
Thank you for that. And the underlying point here is hopefully a federal shutdown will not occur again in this fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we need a motion for the resolution as amended?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Hucker. All those in favor of adopting the consent calendar that includes this particular, no, I'm sorry. All those in favor of adopting this resolution as amended, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're on to presentations, and we have a proclamation recognizing Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month by Council Vice President Katz, and I understand that that County Executive Elridge is here, or he was here? Yes, here he is, joining Council Vice President Katz for this presentation.
And if we could ask, County Executive, how are you? And if we could also ask the Assistant Chief, Marcus Jones, to join us, Debbie Feinstein, who's the Chair of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, and Tom Mannion, who's the Vice Chair of that as well. Did you want to start off speaking? Okay. Nearly 1.5 million high school students nationwide experience physical abuse from a dating partner in a single year. 1 in 3 adolescents in the U.S. is a victim of physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse from a dating partner, a figure that far exceeds rates of other types of youth violence. 1 in 10 high school students has been purposely hit, slapped, or physically hurt by a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Girls and young women between the ages of 16 and 24 experience the highest rate of intimate partner violence, almost triple in the national average. Violent relationships in adolescence can have serious ramifications by putting the victims at higher risk for substance abuse, eating disorders, risky sexual behavior, and further domestic violence. Being physically or sexually abused makes teen girls 6 times more likely to become pregnant and twice as likely to get a sexually transmitted infection. Half of youth who have been victims of both dating violence and rape attempt suicide, compared to 12.5% of non-abused girls and 5.4% of non-abused boys. The Montgomery County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council is working to make sure our young people know about healthy relationships, the different types of dating abuse, warning signs, and how to help a friend. In 2018, the Choose Respect Initiative presented their Expect Respect workshop to over 5,700 students. The Family Justice Center served almost 300 clients between the ages of 14 and 24 in 2018. Did you want to?
Yeah, I just want to add to the statistics. I mean, this is a teen problem, but it's a teen problem that then lasts forever. If our young people don't get this right when they're young, then the expectation is going to become that this is what women have to expect and put up with, and young boys will grow up to be men who think this kind of behavior is sanctioned because there's no condemnation of it and no pushback. And so we need to make sure that we help our kids get this right while they're young, so this does not become a lifelong problem for either the women or the men. And so I really appreciate the work you've done. I've attended the show at Rock over here last few years, and it's really important work, and we need to make sure the message is out there, and we need to make sure that the county will continue to provide, safe harbor and support for victims of dating violence. And so I appreciate your leadership on this, and I really appreciate you all for putting so much time and effort into it. But it's probably one of the most important things that we're going to do, because you cannot set people up for life to have these kind of expectations. It's got to be better than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to speak first, and then we'll do the proclamation? Sure. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Debbie Feinstein. I'm with the State's Attorney's Office. I'm chief of the Special Victims Division there and the current chair of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. And I just wanted to thank County Executive Elrich and Vice, I guess, are you Vice Chair?
No, Tom is Vice Chair. I'm the
excuse me.
outgoing president.
Oh, sorry. No, that's not what I meant. So Sorry,
Oh,
of the
Vice
council,
President,
of the council.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, okay. I thought I was getting it right.
Right. I thought you meant of the.
Councilmember Katz, the Councilmember Katz. How about, let's go with that. Okay. For your leadership and for your support, both of you and many members of the council that are here today and many members of the county executives branch have been very supportive of this initiative, and we're very appreciative. As was described, the issue really is pervasive with respect to teens. Not only are girls victimized, but boys are victimized at a significantly high rate as well. In fact, there was a recent study where the number of boys that were victimized by emotional and verbal abuse actually exceeded the number of teenage girls that were victimized. So I think that's an important thing for all of us to realize, and that's why this initiative is so important, that we reach all of our kids and have them understand the important and healthy dynamics that are related to relationships that'll then take them into adulthood. So we invite everyone to join us for our annual conference on April 7th at Richard Montgomery, as was mentioned by the county executive, and to participate in our programs year-round. We have programs for the public schools, for community organizations, private schools, really any teen-facing organization that is interested in learning more and having a program. The Domestic Violence Coordinating Council is happy to bring that forward and provide that information. So thank you so much for recognizing this month and the prevention efforts of the council.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to? No. And I did want to note that I am the outgoing president. I just was president of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. And I have to tell you, everyone should be aware of all that they do, that we do, because it is so necessary that we never forget the importance of this horrible situation in many cases. Would you like to start off reading the proclamation, please?
You guys really have like small print this time.
It looks fine to me. I mean, go ahead.
Okay. I can read it, but I'm just saying it's small.
Sure.
Okay. Whereas teen dating violence is physical, sexual, psychological, and emotional violence within a dating relationship and includes any pattern of behavior that a person may use to gain power and control over another person, including financial and digital abuse or stalking, and
whereas 1 in 3 females and 1 in 7 males report experiencing teen dating violence, and 1 in 10 Maryland high school students report experiencing physical violence in a dating relationship, and 1 in 10 report experiencing sexual dating violence in a dating relationship, and whereas
February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month and provides an opportunity for our community to acknowledge the prevalence of teen dating violence and to promote education about this issue for our citizens. And, okay, whereas the Montgomery County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council offers the Choose Respect Teen Dating Violence Prevention Initiative, which includes educational programs, an annual conference, a public service announcement competition, and programs for teen athletes, and the Montgomery County Family Justice Center and the partner agencies offer services and support for teens. And
whereas together we can reduce the incidence of dating violence in Montgomery County through public awareness. Now therefore do we, Mark Elrich as County Executive and Nancy Navarro as County Council President, hereby proclaim February 2019 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in Montgomery County. We ask our community to recognize the pervasive problem and teen dating violence, to engage in education and prevention efforts, to support our friends and families in the process of seeking services, and to spread the word about the help available through the Family Justice Center. And it's signed by Mark Elrich and as County Executive and Nancy Navarro as Council President, and it's proclaimed today. Congratulations. Could we ask anybody who's here with the
Very important issues, very important to acknowledge this. Now we are going to move on to our consent calendar. Is there a motion? It's moved by Councilmember Rice, and second by Vice President Katz. I will point to item 7A, which was it's our spending affordability guidelines for the FY20 operating budget. And the Government Operations Committee did meet and has basically put forth a committee recommendation as you have it on the packet. Basically, we have agreed to set the ceiling on property tax revenue with a charter limit, set the ceiling on the aggregate operating budget at $4.9 billion, which is about 1.43% increase from FY19 aggregate operating budget. Also to allocate the aggregate operating budget in the following manner: fund the debt service, PAYGO, CIP current revenue, and retiree health pre-funding at the policy levels, which is consistent with our December 2018 fiscal plan update. Allocate aggregate operating budget to agencies such that local funding for Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College are funded at maintenance of effort levels. And also allocate this aggregate operating budget to county government and park and planning at FY19 levels. We also set an overall target for community grants at $12.2 million, which is consistent with the FY19 approved budget. And just to reference on page 2, you'll see that per the charter, any aggregate operating budget that exceeds the guidelines requires the affirmative vote of 7 council members for approval. This supermajority requirement really is the most significant aspect of the spending affordability guidelines for the operating budget. So this is what actually was recommended by our staff, and the GO committee has made that as a unanimous recommendation. With that, I don't see any other lights, so all those in favor of the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Okay, so now we're on to item 8, which is district council session. And we have item A. This is a ZTA 18-14, farm alcohol production, residential zones. The FED committee recommends approval as amended. Councilmember Reamer, chair of the FED committee.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice and I introduced this zoning change to allow for continued progress in our local winery, brewery, cidery sector, which is really getting a lot of momentum. Many of us were approached by 2 brothers who are entrepreneurs and wanted to open up a brewery on property that had been in their family for some time, which was near Olney. And I think it's exciting to think about what has happened in that part of the county recently. We've got Brookfield Beer Farm, Weradaka, Elder Pine. These 2 young men looking to start a brewery there. There's a lot of improvement in amenities there, and people seem to be really enjoying them, but that's a diversion here. This zoning change is fairly tailored. You know, we chopped it down. Jeff gave us a recommendation for how we might think about restricting it, which, you know, made sense. This is a residential zone, and there are a lot of established communities where they could have a 25-acre parcel, you know, next to them, and we felt like it would be appropriate to take a careful approach here. And so what we've done is we've limited where this use could be, where you could have this use to properties that have at least 25 acres. They have to be in sewer category 6. And then Jeff recommended, which the committee accepted, a requirement that they be on a fairly substantial road, so you wouldn't have access through a cul-de-sac, you know, at the end of a neighborhood. Jeff, what can you share with us here?
The only thing you really missed in the subject matter of the ZTA is on circle page 4, where you're allowing this zone in the RE1 and RE2 zones, and the need for that little bit of caution, particularly on the streets, is because this is predominantly a residential zone. The purposes are all residential.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a side use. Just to note, I think the requirement that it have access from a residential primary or greater just eliminates 4 of the possible 15 sites
Right.
that are 25 acres or more and in this zone. And for the 25-acre requirement, it says a 25-acre site. We said that because it could be a lot or a parcel. We're not requiring the subdivision requirements, but it has to be that size of area.
So if you had a 100-acre farm, you're saying you don't have to subdivide to 25 acres? in
You
order-
could if you wanted to.
But you don't have to.
But you couldn't make it smaller than 25
Right.
acres and
You could
have
make it
this
smaller
use.
then. Right. All right, so again, I think we're getting a lot of results from the changes that we're making at the county level. A lot of entrepreneurs have successfully started businesses once we clear hurdles, and this is yet another hurdle to clear to allow this type of business to thrive.
Thank you, Chairman. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President, and just wanted to speak up. I was not present. I was tending to my 3-week-old at this hearing, but did watch the lively discussion, and should I have been there, I would have been in support of it. And I think it's a great idea, and we came to a good compromise with some of the amendments to lessen the impact with some of the concerns we heard. So I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurship in the Ag Reserve, and excited and urge my colleagues to support it.
Staff would have said it was an excused absence, but I don't have that authority.
We'll think about it, right?
You know, it's interesting. It's like, do you bring up someone's personal business? You're on your own personal business. You know, it's none of our business. Frankly, you weren't there. I don't even know that it needs to be addressed, but you chose to address it, and so that's your prerogative.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to the Fed Committee. Thank you to my lead co-sponsor on this, Councilmember Reamer. This is not only just about ensuring that we continue to support businesses that are looking to create opportunities here in Montgomery County, but it also is about our overall environmental goals. If we are to be serious about climate change, it is about protecting our agricultural reserve, but it's also about encouraging that spaces throughout the county that we know still have large land masses, this is 25 acres, and being able to promote some sort of agricultural activity that's tied to this kind of brewery or winery or cidery in some cases makes complete sense for us. We've got to continue to diversify the ways in which we're promoting environmental sustainability. And that's what I want to continue to remind people about. This isn't just about expanding business opportunities, but it's also about expanding those opportunities for us to preserve some of this space that we find that's very rare outside of our agricultural reserve. And so from that perspective, it really does achieve a multitude of goals. This is about workforce development and job growth. This is about making sure that a lot of our younger folks who are coming through, who are looking at these kinds of opportunities, have other ways in which they can diversify what it is that they want to do. I think about our universities at Shady Grove that now has a degree associated with winemaking. These are the kinds of things that are happening, and we as government need to make sure we're keeping pace and providing those opportunities to folks so that when they do leave with these expertise, they can actually utilize them right here in their own home community. So I think this is a great win for us on so many levels. So thank you.
Thank you. I do want to add my appreciation to Councilmember Reamer and Rice for putting this forward. It is in my district, so it's very exciting that for those who are keeping track of the small things and big things that we do to make Montgomery County business friendly, I think this is one more step towards that goal. So really do appreciate the leadership on this. And so with that, this is a roll call.
Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Joando?
Yes.
Mr. Joando votes yes. Mr. Hucker? Yes. Mr. Hucker votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Albornoz? Yes. Mr. Albornoz votes yes. Mr. Rice? Yes. Mr. Rice votes yes. Mr. Friedson? Yes. Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Mr. Navarro?
Yes, and
Mr.
so that
Navarro
is
votes yes.
unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, so now we're moving on to an overview of the MARC Rail Community Sector Plan. Some people were commenting that maybe County Executive Elrich thought that the MARC plan was about him, but no, it is something different. different mark plan. And so I do appreciate the hard work that has gone into this, and I will turn it to Ms. Dunn to kick it off for us.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm here today with the Planning Board Chair, Mr. Anderson, and the team who has worked on the Mark Rail Communities Master Plan. You'll be receiving a public hearing this evening on this plan, and the work sessions will follow later in another month after we finish with the Veers Mill Plan. But they're going to provide you a brief overview. There is some video in it. They're going to have to switch back and forth between their slide presentation and the video due to some of our technology here, not theirs. So just be patient with that part of it, but it should be a nice overview to get you familiar with what you're going to be hearing tonight. So thank you.
I don't know. There we go. If you could just advance to that first slide. Thank you very much, Council President Navarro. We are going to be presenting a plan that has a lot of similarities to the Veers Mill plan because it's oriented around pedestrian safety. But I don't want to belabor that point because we've discussed some of those issues at length just last week. I wanted to highlight a couple things about this plan that are a little bit different. In particular, we're trying to take better advantage of the MARC stations at Boyd's and Germantown. What you see on this slide is the physical relationship between the new Cabin Branch development, which already has several hundred new homes. There's a shopping mall just north of there. It's not within walking distance of the Boyd's MARC station. And yet, if we could capture even a small number of cars coming from that Cabin Branch development and get those people onto MARC instead of getting on I-270, that would really be a huge benefit to reducing traffic in the area where the roads are really not suited to carry heavy volumes of auto traffic. So they can be intercepted at the MARC station with a larger amount of parking that is compatible with the existing neighborhood, that does not call for a transit-oriented development of the kind we'd see, certainly not in downtown Bethesda or Silver Spring, not really even in the type of situation you'd see in Germantown, but rather simply adding some parking, perhaps one or two new buildings right around the MARC station to make it a community destination that is compatible with the rural character of Boyd's, yet still allows more capacity. There's only 22 boardings a day on the 4 trains in and 5 trains out that currently serve that MARC station. So we can certainly do better to take advantage of that MARC asset and hope to strengthen the case for more MARC service and certainly to avoid any cuts to future MARC service at Boyd's. Next slide. The other part of this plan concerns Germantown, and I just wanted to make the point that the suburbs typically have developed around a cul-de-sac idea that there would be major arterials that are fed by small feeder streets that don't connect to anything else. That creates some really difficult problems with traffic management. And what we hope to see here in Germantown is to encourage some redevelopment, but not just to add more density near MARC, which would be good, but also to encourage some of these street connections to be made. This is the existing street grid connection. You can see there's a lot of streets that really don't lead anywhere. Next slide. Redevelopment, if the property owners take advantage of the redevelopment that's available in this plan, they'll be required to make these street connections, which should help to reduce traffic along 118 and Middlebrook Road. Next slide. This slide just illustrates the general concept that even if with the same amount of lane miles, you can get a lot more traffic on the same amount of street if you have these grid connections. It seems like a simple thing just to make these connections over a few large blocks, but the traffic modeling shows that you can actually do a lot to improve congestion in the area simply by connecting a few of these blocks, breaking them up into smaller pieces. That also reinforces the emphasis on pedestrian safety in this plan because by encouraging people to disperse the traffic through the street grid instead of everybody having to jump on 118 or onto Middlebrook Road or one of the major arterials, you can slow down traffic while still retaining the same amount of automobile capacity you had before. We're also proposing lane diets, narrower lanes, better sidewalks, those sort of pedestrian improvements, which should also have the benefit of slowing down traffic and improving pedestrian safety, but also encouraging a sense of place around this station. We're not trying to recreate Germantown Town Center just down the street, but we're considering that Middlebrook is already right next to Great Seneca High School, which is almost doubling the number of students with their reconstruction. There's so many teenagers already trying to get back and forth between that area and Germantown Town Center. It's really crucial that we improve pedestrian safety in that area and also create an environment that's more suitable for biking, walking, dropping people off at the transit station, and not simply driving your car as quickly as possible through that intersection. So with that, I will turn it over to the team. We'll talk, I'm sure, more about pedestrian safety tonight at the public hearing, but I wanted to highlight some of these concepts because they're important for other plans that you'll have in front of you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Roberto Duke, and I'm the lead planner for the Mark Rail Communities Plan. And I briefly wanted to give you a regional context, so you all probably know, for both the Boyds and Germantown area, the Mark Station areas. So both stations are located in the upper portions of the county, and they're approximately 2.5 miles apart. And each station has a historic character to it, and a strong sense of place and history. This is just another map showing the two stations in relation to one another. One of the things I want to point out is the development. So here's Germantown and the development that has occurred there, and partially or mostly because one of the things is on water and sewer, versus Boyd's, which is only 2.5 miles up the road, which is on well and septic, so much less development. And these circles around here show what a 5-minute walk would be and what a 10-minute walk could be. So briefly, I just want to go over the plan purpose. It's to promote a safe range of transportation alternatives. And just wanted to point out in the photographs here, this is the Boyd's Local Park trail leading through the Boyd's Local Park. And this is an image that we took, it was in June a few years ago, of someone trying to bike along Middlebrook Road. So it's a very narrow sidewalk, speeding traffic, lack of shade trees, so very inhospitable to anybody who really wants to either bike or walk along the road. And we also want to improve the transportation system in the area, create better connectivity to the station itself. The upper photograph is of the underpass. There's a pedestrian underpass that you can take from the north side to the south side in Boyd's. Currently, this underpass is closed, so it's in a precarious condition. It's from about 1927 when the single track was made into a double track. The second photograph is of Middlebrook Road. So again, you can see the view of the narrow sidewalks and the traffic that comes along there. Another purpose of the plan is to promote the historic character of the area and the residential neighborhoods. And these are just two photographs of the one's of the historic mill and Hoyle's Mill, and that's in Boyd's. And the Pumphrey Mattini House, this is in Germantown on the upper edge of the parking lot adjacent to the Mark Station. And finally, we want to revitalize the built environment around each Mark Station. This aerial view is of the Anderson properties, and since the plan was presented to you or given to you in December, the Anderson property has been purchased by the county. So looking at additional parking and bus service to Boyd's to try to capture people coming down from Clarksburg and Cabin Branch. And this is just an aerial view of the existing Mark Station parking lot. In the background, a Verizon substation, a 7-Eleven. Along here is Germantown Road. And the Liberty Mill Apartments in the background. So we have a few big ideas, and we wanted to boil it down to just one for each. So for Boyd's is to use the site of the historic mill, so the Anderson property, as a co-location hub, and to allow for both MARC commuting and for community-related events. With Middlebrook Road, as you can, and I'll show in the video shortly, Middlebrook Road is a very, cars are speeding along there at very fast pace. The sidewalks are very narrow. So we wanted to make sure that Middlebrook Road is safe for students, pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists. And again, like Chairman Anderson was saying, Seneca Valley High School is expanding from approximately 1,300 students to a little bit over 2,400 students. Construction is expected to be completed by 2020. So there will be a lot more foot traffic in the area around the Germantown MARC Station area. So briefly, just wanted to show you the land uses. So we have the existing land use for Boyd's on the left, and the proposed land use for Boyd's on the right. So we're not intending to really change too much. We're just saying that in the area of the MARC station, so right here, that's an opportunity for activity, for additional parking, for community events, that sort of thing. And so briefly, I'm just going to show you a series of slides, again, orienting you to the Boyd's station area to show the MARC station parking lot is in the rose color in the center. This is the Boyd's boundary. And in the video that we're about to show, we're going to show some very important locations. The Boyd's Local Park, which is one of Park and Planning's larger parks in the area. The road over Clarksburg Road, the MD 121, the bridge. The railroad bridge, which is a little bit undersized at this point. It was built in 1927, so it's very narrow. It's difficult for cars to get through. Barnesville Road, leading up to the station area. The Anderson property itself, so that's where just north of the station area, the existing parking lot. Upper White Ground Road, which is part of a historic community. And then the lower part of White Ground Road, which has the Boyd's Negro School and the Edward U. Taylor School. And something interesting to point out about the Edward U. Taylor School, it was the first school that was integrated in the county, and it was where white students came, and it was a black school, and white students came there and integrated that school, and it was, I believe, one of the only ones to do that in the county. So I'm going to have to switch over quickly to the video just to briefly show the area. So this is a video. This is the train arriving. There are only approximately 16 to 20 people arriving per day at the station. This is the Boyd's Local Park in the foreground. In the background, you can kind of see Germantown. This is the 121 bridge. You can see Sugarloaf Mountain in the distance. This is the undersized underpass and Barnesville Road in the foreground here, cars going up. The Anderson property is on the left here. So that's where the expansion would occur. The historic mill is in the center, and the existing parking lot is in the background there. There are about 16 spaces there, and it was overparked when we took the photographs. This is going down White Ground Road, showing the character of the road. This is a historic, this is a rustic road, exceptional rustic road. This is the Boyd's Negro School, and finally, the Edward U. Taylor School, an aerial view of the Edward U. Taylor School, and that's at the southern end of White Ground Road. And then this is just to end, showing folks departing, having to cross the train tracks at grade. So again, since we're dealing with two areas, we're showing here the existing and proposed land uses for Germantown. And as you can see, the southern portion of Germantown, Mark Station area is a very established residential neighborhood with single-family homes, some townhouses. North of the tracks are where there are more, opportunities for development. You have Seneca Valley High School at the corner of Middlebrook Road and Great Seneca Highway. So those are the northern portion is really where there are more development opportunities, and the hatched areas are showing the existing parking lot for the Mark Station area. So again, I'll briefly show you. So in the Rose area are the Mark Station parking lot areas, the existing ones. Seneca Valley High School at the corner of Middlebrook and Great Seneca Highway. Middlebrook Road itself will show you a video along Middlebrook Road. Another video of the intersection crossing with students crossing there. A view looking up Liberty Mill, so from the established residential neighborhood looking north. And I will want to point out that Liberty Mill / Walter Johnson Road used to be Germantown Road before the new Germantown Road was built. So it was kind of the main street for Germantown. The Rolling Hills Apartments, which is a 468-unit development. The existing, again, another view of the existing residential area, and back to the Mark Station. So again, this is just a view, that was just a view of Seneca Valley High School, the building of Seneca Valley High School. This is showing folks crossing against traffic on Middlebrook Road. And this is right during students departing in the afternoon. There were a number of students, and happily, in this case, they were all, walking in the crosswalks. But you can see the amount of traffic that is even there at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's pretty consistent. This is a view looking up Liberty Mill Road towards the Mark Station. So you see the upper portions of the Mark Station parking lot. The historic district is over on the left here of Germantown. And the Pumphrey Mattini House is right in the center there. So this is a view of the post office and the Rolling Hills development. And this is a view south of the tracks. So the flavor of the existing residential neighborhood south of the tracks. And finally, just showing, this was, sorry for that the video is so dark, but this was around 5:30 in the evening, and just showing a number of people departing. And I will have to mention that in terms of the Brunswick line, which is this line of the Mark, this is the station with the most boardings. There are approximately 1,000 boardings a day at this station. And so, like Chairman Anderson was saying, we're trying to capture people from having to get onto 270 and try to capture them at these stations so we can better utilize them. So we had a significant amount of community engagement throughout the process. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. A significant amount of community engagement. There was a 4-day workshop in March of 2016, a number of community meetings. In addition to that, we worked significantly with the Boyd Civic Association, the Germantown Historical Society, the Boyd's Historical Society. We had meetings with the Up-County Advisory Board, the Germantown Alliance, and our a public hearing for the planning board was even held up at the Black Rock Center for the Arts last February. And this is just, in addition to that community input, in September of 2018, so just this last fall, the Boyd Civic Association and the Boyd's Historical Society wanted to have a charrette to look at some more of the Boyd's Mark Station area to see, what they would want and what they would envision for the community. So they thought it was important to restore the mill and to reinforce the core of the commercial area of Boyd's and to integrate some type of community use into the Boyd's Mark Station area. And we do have a brief video showing that. And I wanted to thank Scott Knutson with KNU. He ran the charrette. He's a community member, lives in the community, and he's a local architect. And he organized this. It was a 2-day event and significant participation. I think there were about 45 people there looking at the workshop, during the workshop, and really did a great job. And they presented their findings to the planning board, and I'm sure they would be happy to present to you all also. So in terms of the plan itself, it's organized into 4 sections. So connect, renew, preserve, and sustain. So connect would deal with the multi-modes of transportation. So not just people driving, but also walking and biking, students walking and biking to the area. We want to reinforce the land uses and strengthen the public realm in each area, in each community, preserve the historic nature of the community and adaptive reuse, and also looking at the residential areas adjacent to these communities and sustainably support both communities. Some of the main concepts are for the Boyds are to preserve the historic district, to make better connections to the station area, to enhance the park area and that sort of thing. So this is just in terms of a big idea. So this is a concept for what an expanded Mark Station area could look like north of the tracks. So south of the tracks, here's the existing Mark parking lot, and here's a proposal, an idea for how the north section could look like. And this would be an area for a bus turnaround for buses coming from Clarksburg down to the Mark Station, so you don't even have to drive to the Mark Station itself. And reuse of the pedestrian underpass so that even folks, so it could become ADA compliant. And this is just a conceptual sketch of what it could look like with the bus service and the additional parking. And this is kind of showing what adaptive reuse could look like at the station. So we have in the center the historic mill and some other buildings around in the station area. So if you're coming to the station area via bus, you could have maybe covered shelter during off-peak hours, so non-mark hours. You could have community-related events at the station area. You'd have the parking there. So just showing it as a multi-purpose facility. With Germantown, again, it's to protect the historic sites and historic districts, to provide a mix of uses north of the tracks, within walking distance of the station, and to make better connections to the station so that people are able to walk and bike to the station. It's interesting that at the station now, approximately 55% of the people coming to the station live less than 2 miles away, but everybody's driving to the station primarily. It would be nice if you could get a lot of folks to walk or bike if able to, if it was more convenient and safe. And so again, like Chairman Anderson was talking about, here's the existing condition along Middlebrook Road, and we're proposing a road diet. So right now there's 6 lanes of traffic and even greater at some points. So there have been multiple points of vehicular and pedestrian conflict. Unfortunately, along portions of Middlebrook Road, MCDOT looked at a pedestrian road safety audit for the entire 1 mile stretch of 1.5 mile stretch of Middlebrook Road, and there since I believe 2010 there have been about 18 pedestrian / vehicular or bicycle accidents in the area, with 2 fatalities, one within our plan area and one immediately outside. And so, again, like you're seeing, there are narrow sidewalks, lack of shade trees and buffering. So we're looking at providing better connectivity or better relationship along Middlebrook Road. So the Aqua is showing a dedicated bike lane, and it's buffered with shade trees. And then there's also a dedicated walking sidewalk for pedestrians. And this is just to show, again, the existing street section with the lack of shade trees, that the sidewalks are contiguous to the roadways, and what it could look like if rebuilt with the separated bike lanes and sidewalks for pedestrians and shade trees. Finally, again, like I was pointing out, Walter Johnson / Liberty Mill Road was at one point 118. So we're not looking to recreate 118 or to take away from the Germantown Town Center, but to try to create that roadway, that alignment, as more of a neighborhood main street, so with activities and with adaptive reuse. So in this image, you see an image of the Pumphrey Mattini House on the right-hand side of what it could look like with a street fabric that, has both, is both conducive for the neighbors and for commuters. And with that, I'm pretty much finished with my presentation.
Thank you so much. That's a great presentation. Really appreciate the work that has gone into this. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to Planning Board and staff for this great summary. As the district council member and as a person who's lived in Germantown for the past 16 years, I have a lot to say about some of the conclusions, and I think that, again, it'll be interesting to hear at our public hearing, but as I looked at the pictures of the charrette that you held, as we see in most communities, we're missing a lot of folks who live in those areas who would have a lot to say about what it is that they'd like to see in their communities. So let me help, because I know in looking at the list of who's coming tonight, they're not going to be there. So let me help to give some voice to some of those. I want to start off, and I always get criticized for this, but I believe it's a reality and it's important for us to talk about. When you talk about bicycle lanes, especially on Middlebrook Road, I always wonder, just as on Richter Farm, where are folks biking to? When I think about origination points and where most of the residential is, and so for those folks, I guess at the intersection of Father Hurley and Middlebrook, where we have a lot of our apartment buildings, the Canterbury and all of those that are along Father Hurley, I assume that maybe those are the folks that you're thinking about. But again, if the ride-on transfer point is actually by the Chick-fil-A and BBT, which is to the left, there's no reason for you to go down Middlebrook, and even that far down, you would go to your left and cut through Germantown Town Center to get to the transfer station. So I could understand a route like that, but to actually go down Middlebrook doesn't make much sense because there's nothing there to transfer to or to go to. Now there's retail that's down there, but that retail is down there for the folks that live in that area. That's the intersection of 355 in Middlebrook. There's plenty of retail that's up by Middlebrook and 118. So again, and there's duplication. So it's not as if there's something special that's down there unless you want to rent a car from Enterprise that's unique to 355 in Middlebrook that isn't at Germantown Town Center. So just help me to understand. I'm all for having protected lanes and all those kinds of things if there's a need for bicycle lanes to begin with, but where are people going on a bicycle on Middlebrook Road in Germantown?
Well, I'll let the staff speak to the way that they analyze the potential demand for the bicycling infrastructure, but I guess I would say, in general, the purpose of this type of cross-section with the additional landscaping and trees, the additional bike lane, the wider sidewalks, is not just because, yes, we want to accommodate all users of the road. That's part of it. But it's also that the traffic analysis shows that the same levels of traffic can be supported with less space for cars. And we're not trying to take away space from cars just for the sake of taking it away, but in order to calm down traffic, in order to reduce vehicle speeds. So it's, in some cases, it's a little bit like Spring Street down by where I live in Silver Spring, where there's a protected bike lane. I use that bike lane. My son uses that bike lane. A lot of people don't use the bike lane, but it's serving to calm traffic. It's reducing effective crossing distances for pedestrians because you don't have to, you can step up right to the edge of the lane before you have to commit to stepping in front of traffic. And so you get a lot of safety benefits for people even crossing the street, even if they're not necessarily going laterally along the road, using that sidewalk to get to a destination or using the bike lane to get to a destination. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, a little bit, but let me just not conflate the two together with talking about hiker-biker trails and having some pedestrian protections, which I definitely agree with are needed there, and that's certainly where we need to expand. Having the narrow sidewalks that we have now, there's no question that we can benefit from having the much wider hiker-biker trail that allows for folks to then utilize if they wanted to ride their bicycle in those areas, those kinds of things. I'm just always cautious of the fact that, especially in an area that's such a heavily commuted route that goes directly to 270. And one of the realities is, and this is why I continue to tell folks that, look, you know, you can try and do as much as you can, but until we have much regular service, much more regular service with MARC, folks are going to continue to drive. And so because of that, by giving lane diets, all you're doing is frustrating drivers and making them more adamant about getting to their destination faster, and things are in their way and it's slower, and so therefore they want to drive faster to get there. It's not changing their schedule. It's not changing their responsibilities. It's not changing anything with regards to their lives. And so unfortunately, all you're doing is creating more obstacles for folks by narrowing those lanes in those kinds of situations. Again, what I think that we need to do is certainly widen the sidewalks in those areas and give us the hiker-biker trails. Do some sort of speed management. So if we're lowering the speed limit, I'm certainly all for that, as well as doing speed cameras. But again, it's one of those where I just caution us by trying to put these approaches that may fit for Silver Spring that are not the same as Germantown. And I keep trying to remind folks that we are not the same community, and the folks don't think the same kinds of way. Again, and one of the things that I also wanted to get to that you can comment on as well is about the radius and MARC station. And I'd commented to Councilmember Friedson, as a person who used the MARC system before being elected and used to ride the MARC to DC to Metro Center. It's one of those where I would never walk there in a suit, in a briefcase, in the summer, or on a day like today. So people drive, and so that's the reason why there's so much traffic that's there. And it's one of those things that I think folks forget about oftentimes, is that not everyone has the luxury of having a shower and things like that in their office buildings or whatever the cases may be. You have a lot of professionals that are working in this area, and so it's not easy to then take a shower and put on your cologne and deodorant and then walk a mile and get sweaty and stinky to then get on a train and ride a train for an hour and then go into the office. And so that's why I can just answer for you as a person who did it. That's why people drive and won't walk. You can give me a electric bike. You can give me whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. I'm not doing that because it's going to make it so that I'm not presentable when I then need to go into work. And so it's thinking about those realities that we have to couple also in terms of saying that I think that for us, in terms of our focus, we really need to hone in on building a parking garage that gives us the ability to have more folks that are there. And that needs to be the priority for that MARC station to really build up ridership. Because just as we see at Shady Grove, it's the same exact thing. It's that folks get frustrated about going to Shady Grove, same thing I used to do, because you can't find parking. You're driving around, and then all of a sudden you're 15 minutes late for you to get to work because you don't have parking spaces. So it's a lot, but I want you to know that it's important because these are the things that I hear from my neighbors, my friends who live in Germantown that tell me these are the things that they are frustrated with that you won't hear from the charrettes because they're not able to go to them, and you won't hear from them tonight because they're not going to be there.
Well, I'm glad you raised it because I neglected to mention in the summary, it's not just additional surface parking at Boyd's. A centerpiece of the Germantown part is a multi-level parking deck at Germantown. So that's my fault. It slipped my mind. But that is a very important point. And certainly, if this were Silver Spring, we wouldn't be recommending adding hundreds of additional parking spaces because that's an environment where we would want to encourage people to walk or bicycle or take another form of transit to get to the destination or hopefully live right next door to the transit station. In this case, we recognize that there's a little bit of a chicken-egg problem with MARC service, where if you're going to ask the state to increase MARC service, you have to be able to justify it in terms of ridership. How can you have more ridership if you don't have more people who are living proximate to the transit? And I think the answer is add more parking. That's the way you're going to, in the short term, be able to juice the ridership to the point where you can justify better service, which in turn can encourage people to build things closer to MARC, and then you kind of get a virtuous cycle going. But I actually think we're not at all in disagreement with you, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised to see what the traffic modeling shows about what happens with these lane diets. It should not reduce access for automobiles, but it also will improve safety and improve access for people on foot.
And I just wanted to point out, within the document, there's a diagram showing for Germantown a garage on the north side of the tracks, along with some potential expansion for surface parking on the south side.
Can you comment about the bicycle lanes? Because again, it's something that I deal with constantly in terms of people asking, why do we have bicycle lanes along Richter Farm? Why do we have these, painted striped lanes on Middlebrook right now, not separated, and no one's using them? And I can tell you the reason why no one is using them is because no one wants to put their life at risk by being in non-separated. So I totally get that. But again, it's one of those where, what have we seen that begs the question of spending the money for creating a separated bicycle lane? I'm not talking about the widening of a hiker-biker trail, but specifically a separated bicycle lane, when we could do much more in terms of traffic improvements at some of the intersections, things that we've done in the past, and utilize that money that way. Who are the folks that are asking, because they're not contacting my office, that are Germantown residents? I'm not talking about folks from other parts of the county.
Well, I think we should be prepared at the work session to talk about the modeling of latent bicycling demand. That was the underlying the bicycle plan, and this builds on some of those recommendations, uses the same kind of analysis. How do we know bicyclists would want to be here if they had the option? I think we have good answers to that based on quantitative measures of origin-destination pairs, places that should theoretically at least attract trips of short distances that could be covered on foot or on a bicycle, and I think we can show those to you, and we look forward to getting into that in detail.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. I look forward to taking this up at the committee, and it's good that we have gone through this exercise to really chart out a new approach for these particular areas. MARC, from a big picture, I think we can't really understate the importance of MARC to the future of the county. I wish that the state and the county were thinking bigger about how the MARC rail system fits into our transportation future. I'm working now on an initiative to get the state to sit down with VRE and figure out how can we run MARC trains all the way to National Landing, where Amazon is going to be located in the future. You can imagine having a one-seat ride from Germantown to National Landing. That's pretty compelling. That's a pretty great reason to live there, where you can get access that way. And of course, there really isn't a good solution for driving to National Landing because it's so far in the Beltway. It's 45 minutes from the Beltway to National Landing, let alone how long it takes you to get to that exit off the Beltway. So, we're hearing a lot about 270 and 495, and I think that 270 component is important for getting to Fairfax and Tysons and that corridor, but if you want to get to the tech economy that's growing up in Crystal City and that inner part of that Northern Virginia area, MARC is the solution. But we're a long way. Well, Metro and MARC is the solution, but for this part of this side of the county, MARC is the one-seat ride. But we're a long way, to having interoperable systems where those trains can ride through. But we ought to be thinking about that. And when we're there, changes like these will be hopefully, either ready to go or already made. There is another initiative to get ridership up on MARC, which is more bus service to these stations as well. I was pleased last fall, I've been working the last year or so to propose a enhanced meet the MARC kind of service for Clarksburg residents that is now operating. So we heard this from a lot of Clarksburg folks that they want to take the MARC, but to the parking issue, there's no bus service, and then when they drive, the parking is full at the earliest in the morning. So what are they supposed to do? They want to go to Shady Grove, they can't. So that was a real issue. So we've added some bus service there. It's part of the solution. I do think this road diet is important. You said 17 pedestrians struck there in recent years. I had previously taken a look at where the highest road diet priorities might be in the county. I think we ought to hear from DOT and from planning about that when we get into this conversation. We could sketch out a road diet for a lot of roads in the county, frankly, that need it. But I'd like to know where this one ranks, because I think we ought to have in our budget, in our capital budget, a road diet item. It's the kind of thing that we typically talk about, but we don't really ever do. And I want to just underscore, I think that when you change the infrastructure, that built infrastructure, you calm traffic down and people can still drive where they need to drive, but suddenly people aren't getting hit as much. They might even bike. But I think the benefit of those bike lanes for pedestrians is really essential. And so there's more to it than only expanding access to biking. So we'll take all these issues up. I certainly heard what the district council member had to say on that, and we'll look forward to the dialogue at committee.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights. I understand that March 11th is the first work session, the Fed committee, so everybody tune in and participate in that as well. Thank you very much for that overview. Thank you. For our next item, this was an added item on the agenda, is legislative session day 4. I'm going to read this introduction of expedited bill 3-19, administration executive branch, non-merit positions. Lead sponsor is the council president at the request of county executive. Public hearing is scheduled for March 5th, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. And with that, I just want to say that we are adjourned until 7:30 p.m., where we will come back for a public hearing on the MARC Rail Plan. Thank you so much.